When all is said and done, when all these emails and papers surrounding the appointment come out, are we left with the conclusion that his mind was on other things, he was heavily...
His mind was definitely not on other things.
Or that he was told, in no uncertain terms, Mandelson continued this relationship with this paedophile, this friendship, and in order to appoint him as ambassador to the US, you're just going to have to overlook this. Because if we certainly end up there, then I don't see how Keir Starmer...
No.
So where are we going to end up?
Where we're going to end up.
Hello, welcome to Talking Politics. I'm Tom Bradby.
And I'm Robert Peston.
Let's cut straight to it. Is Keir Starmer going to survive?
What's your time frame?
I think that this week, next month's a different era. Let's talk about the next week or two. Is he going to survive this immediate crisis? That's my...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's difficult to see how he doesn't get through the rest of this week, given that the two main potential challengers for the job have literally only minutes before we're recording this come out backing him. They are Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and Angela Rayner, who was his deputy and was forced out after she ran into difficulties about paying the wrong rate of stamp duty on a property she bought. And so given that they've both said calm down, along with, I have to say, I mean, it's been one of the most extraordinary days in politics that I can remember for some time. I mean, to have pretty much every member of the cabinet saying how lucky the country is to have Keir Starmer as Prime Minister is something you only see when, you know, a Prime Minister is in the deepest possible trouble. But yeah, I think he does get through this week. But, actually, I just said in a blog I've just put out, I mean, you know, the ship that he's in seems to be heading for we're not at the eye of the storm yet. So whether he can, get through even a couple of weeks, we'll come on to the next test in a minute, is still up for debate.
So I was thinking this morning, because it's a fun game, if I was his advisor, things that are never going to happen...
Well, there are two jobs going. I mean, again, one reason he's in so much trouble is Chief of Staff has gone. They've appointed two people as acting Chiefs of Staff.
And Head of Comms.
The Director of Communications has gone. There's no Director of Comms. So which one of them do you want, Tom?
I can't think of anything worse than doing any of them. But I was because it's a fun game, I was pondering, what would you say to him this morning? Should he go? Should he not? Should he think about it? How close are you to the edge? If I was his advisor, I would say, look, the public are very angry about this scandal. They're very angry with you, but they don't think of you as that type of guy on any level. And so therefore, I would say, if you stick it out, that anger might pass.
What kind of guy?
He's not the Mandelson guy, the guy who I would say most people think of as hanging around seedy, rich, powerful people and not minding too much about it.
Hang on again. So look, you know, when I talk to MPs, they are saying this is cutting through, and actually you just said this, right?
It is.
They're saying it's cutting through with a ferocity and immediacy that even Partygate didn't do, right? I mean, you know, I was talking to one MP just yesterday, actually Paula Barker, in Liverpool, who said, you know, she was shouted at by two men when she was canvassing, you know, in a way that was genuinely very frightening. People are, you know, MPs are saying to me that, you know, there is just a fury out there about this, and there are two elements to it. One of them is just straightforwardly at Peter Mandelson, but there is a fury with Starmer that he appointed him, right? Now, the anger is most acute among women who literally cannot, many of them, comprehend how the mere fact that Mandelson, you know, was friendly with the paedophile billionaire wasn't, for many people, they say, well, what questions would you, there's no doubt about the relationship. Why would you ask Peter Mandelson to characterise it for you? That is, it's in the public domain. Everybody knows he's been friendly. Why isn't that reason enough just to say he is not fit to be American ambassador, right? And as I say, most acute among women, but fury everywhere.
Can I drill into this for a second?
Yeah.
Because in the end, this is determines his survival, right? On this subject.
Yeah.
Do you think he thought about it and decided, yes, that is very bad, but I'm going to overlook it because I think he'd make a good ambassador? Or do you just think he didn't really think about it? He thought Mandelson was probably telling the truth when he said he didn't really have any meaningful contact. I mean, I don't know what was said between them. But what is your precise understanding and assessment of what went through Keir Starmer's head at this time? Because that does, I think, have a bearing on whether he ultimately survives this.
So I think I may have said this to you before, that the reason this is so damaging for Starmer is because it goes to what I would say is the significant flaw in the one part of his governance since becoming Prime Minister that on the surface at least seemed to be going better, which was his management of international relations. Now, many people would say just straightforwardly on Ukraine that he has done a good job when it comes to putting together the coalition of the willing, putting pressure on Trump not to withdraw completely. And that is, I think you have to give him credit. That is, one part of his approach that I think broadly has gone pretty well. How much, within the context of, British people who probably think it's just the job of British prime ministers to look after these things, and in effect, how much actual credit he gets in terms of, electoral support, don't know. But I personally think that's an important thing he's achieved. But more broadly than that, he has not manifest. Most people would say about Keir Starmer, he's a decent person with decent values, right? None of that has been manifested, or almost none of that has been manifested in his relationship with Donald Trump, who has time and again, domestically and internationally, crossed all sorts of what you might call the kind of ethical lines that would matter to Keir Starmer. And, the normal excuse for not challenging and not standing up is there's just a convention, you don't interfere in other people's politics. But Trump and Vance show no qualms about interfering in our politics. And therefore, you could say this is just a new world in which actually he should be showing his own basic values, right? And he would be certainly possibly more respected by British people if he did that. And some people would say if he stood up to Trump more, he might even get more respect from Trump. Who knows, right? Very difficult to make that latter case because, it's a pure hypothetical. The reason I think that he appointed Mandelson is because he basically thinks Trump is dodgy. Therefore, if we're going to deal with somebody who's dodgy, we better appoint our own dodgy person who knows how to wheel and deal and, show a kind of subtlety that typical officials who work for the British government wouldn't show. So I think, if I'm honest with you, I think he let his own ethical standards slip in the Mandelson case because he thought that broadly, as what you might call an ethically challenged human being, would stand better. But I do think equally the risk now is that so much of this foreign policy approach also crumbles.
Obviously, the opinion polls tell us what we probably instinctively already know, which is that Trump is really very unpopular in this country now and getting more unpopular.
That's right.
I mean, his approval ratings are tanking in America. but like they're a long way south of that here. And by the way, I think that is a problem increasingly for Nigel Farage as we go forward from this.
Which will be interesting.
But you're right. I think Keir Starmer's softly approach to Trump is really doing him no favours, and particularly in its bearing to this. But I suppose, to go back to the role, I'm his advisor and I'm trying to tell him what to do. You practically do survive this. I guess to drill down on your point a little further, when all is said and done, when all these emails and papers surrounding the appointment come out, as a lot of them now will, are we left with the conclusion that his mind was on other things? He was
his mind was definitely not on other things, right? I think we go.
Let me pose the thing to get to the clarity.
Right.
Or are we going to be left with the clear certainty that he was told in no uncertain terms Mandelson continued this relationship with this paedophile, this friendship, after he was clearly a paedophile because he'd been convicted of it and come out of prison, and the friendship was real, ongoing and meaningful, and in order to appoint him as ambassador to the US, you're just going to have to overlook this, because if we certainly end up there, then I don't see how Keir Starmer does.
No.
So where are we going to end up?
Where we're going to end up, right, is sort of where, I said the sort of righteous anger, particularly of women members of his own government, let alone the other women I was referring to, would be, which is he gets the due diligence from the Proprietary and Ethics Department of the Cabinet Office, which raises all these questions about, which basically says, Mandelson stayed in Epstein's property in 2009 when Epstein was in prison, having been convicted of soliciting a child for prostitution. It says he's continued a relationship with Epstein after imprisonment. It says all that. And then Starmer asks McSweeney to ask Mandelson 3 questions. One is, did he stay in this property? What's not clear to me is whether Mandelson replied, I can't remember, or no. But either way, he fudged it, right? And he definitely downplayed, as we've now seen from quite how extraordinarily close Mandelson and Epstein were after he was, after he was released from prison. Astonishingly close, right? It was almost like a love affair if you read some of these emails, right? He definitely minimised that, no question, right? But it comes back to the initial point, right? Why would you need to have those questions answered, right? If you already know, right, that there was a friendship, and what you're now relying on is this, Peter Mandelson's word for whether the friendship continued to be, quite as it doesn't stack up, right? It's just, some would say just asking, once they got once you got the Cabinet Office document, right? At that point, you just say it's not worth the risk, and and it's over. Completely. And there were other candidates. That is the point. So I don't believe it's going away. The fact that Morgan McSweeney, his chief of staff, right, resigns and says, I am resigning because I, implies among other people, right, gave you advice that he is the right person, right? He resigns for advising, but, we've used this expression time and again on this podcast. Advisors advise, but it's the Prime Minister who decides. And if you have to resign for advising, the man who ultimately makes the decision. I challenged him in his press conference and I said, this was your appointment, Prime Minister, and he agreed that it was his appointment. So there is just something, he's not on solid ground at all here. And as far as I can see, if because I've been talking to obviously members of the cabinet and both MPs who want him out and others who don't want him out, right? And in the end, their argument for Starmer staying boils down to nothing more than, and I'm not saying this is a small point, but that as a country we've been a bit of a joke over the last, whatever it is, 10 years, with the sheer number of prime ministers that we've had. We just look like an incredibly unstable democracy. And their argument is it's bad for the UK if we have yet another prime minister appointed in the middle, before an election. And I sort of get that, but it's not much of a defence.
Okay, I want to ask about that. We have to mention that we've approached Peter Mandelson for comment about the various allegations, and he has not got back to us. So let's just go on with this. We've painted a pretty strong picture in this of a prime minister in the deepest of all possible trouble, right? White hot anger over Epstein, slightly moving around on the target, but as you say, occasionally directed at him or significantly directed at him because he appointed Peter Mandelson. How could he without, when he knew this guy had been continuing to be a friend with a paedophile and all the rest of it, particularly, now when you stop and examine it, it just feels absolutely, utterly incomprehensible. That's not going to get easier as the weeks go forward. People are angry with him anyway, think he's not very competent. And then on the other side of the ledger, you've got you and I standing in Downing Street, Liz Truss coming, Liz Truss going. I mean, there was a moment when British politics became high comedy as much as drama. And I guess one does slightly shudder at the thought of going back into all that. So I guess
it's terrible for the UK. I mean, if it is terrible for the UK. Yeah. I mean, because we were supposed to be, particularly after they won this enormous landslide victory, we were supposed to be the stable democracy in Europe. And if again, we have a prime minister just unable to command the support of the House of Commons, and in this case, it is really extreme in terms of the failure because, as well over 400 MPs.
Well, it would be a staggering failure on a number of fronts, massive majority. But as you say, more than anything, and this is how it differs from Partygate and Boris Johnson, more than anything, a country that has spent the last 2 years willing him to succeed in the sense that they don't want another prime minister, they don't want to change, they want to get on with it.
I just remind you of one thing, right? So, Boris Johnson, would be widely regarded now by many people as a terrible failure as a prime minister, and all the stuff that we and others reported on in terms of the parties in Downing Street, or his complete inability to get to grips with the behaviour of different members of his team at different times, and obviously the acute example was Chris Pincher. His one of his senior whips. The one thing though that he was able to do. I mean, now his record, even at the time, his record of not locking down early enough with COVID, obviously. At the time, it was sort of shocking how chaotic it was at as we had this awful virus getting here. But I don't know if you remember, because there was a period when Johnson was incredibly popular because, they were able to say he got the big things right, like developing the vaccine, right? So the COVID vaccine task force was, for a period for him, amazingly successful, right? And he mounts this campaign. The thing about Boris Johnson is, okay, he's flawed character, but he gets these big things right, like the COVID, and his popularity soared. I don't know if you remember, but it absolutely. And the problem another problem that Starmer has is, what are the big things that Keir Starmer gets right when his ministers are all rallying behind him today and saying, it's not time for a change. the question you've got to ask them is, well, what is the simple big thing that you can say to the British country that this Prime Minister, they can say lots of little things, and they do. They say, we've made all these measures to bring down the cost of living a bit, and the interest rates are coming down a bit, and the economy is recovering a bit. I mean, quite a lot of this stuff that's happening, which is positive, has literally nothing to do with the government. And it's just good luck if the economy is turning a bit. We'll wait and see whether that is true. You've got Angela Rayner today talking about the agenda that she really likes to do with, workers' rights, for example, but in the country as a whole, that is a program that does not unite absolutely everybody. And so the problem I think that Keir Starmer has is not just the problem with Peter Mandelson. It is that he has never, since becoming Prime Minister, been able to tell a simple, clear story about what he's doing to make the country hopeful again.
Yeah, but apart from all that, it's like every time I think about this, maybe you too, you go through the same thing. You think, well, they can't possibly get rid of him because the country just won't stick another Prime Minister. And then you have this conversation, you think, well, he's not going to be there in the summer. This is hopeless. But anyway, I've got one very brief question to answer at the end. If he goes, who's your money on? Because I get asked that question a lot. Likely to.
So one of the reasons, look, in some ways, he is in some ways a very lucky Prime Minister, right? I mean, imagine if all those Mandelson emails had been published before Andy Burnham said he wanted to run in Gorton and Denton. I think it would have been incredibly difficult for the Prime Minister to do what he actually did, which was to block him.
Yeah.
Right? So Burnham is out of the picture. But right now, he's sort of the only one, partly because he's got this power base in Manchester where he can show what he's doing, who's sort of got a programme that feels different from Starmer's and has been able to, I suppose, show how he's a better communicator and a better campaigner. But he hasn't got a seat, so he's out of the picture completely. Wes Streeting has, he has got a big loyal following among MPs. I mean, he's a great schmoozer, way better than the Prime Minister.
Almost everyone is.
But sort of unlike the Prime Minister, knows all the MPs by name, has a decent relationship even with those who don't share his values. His problem is he is widely seen as somebody who was a protege of Peter Mandelson. There had been rumours that, we know that all communications between Mandelson as US ambassador and members of the government will be published unless they somehow threaten national security or our relationship with other countries. And so there's been these rumours that they're likely to be too friendly communication between Mandelson and Streeting. I am told by people close to Streeting that he's not worried about that those communications are professional and not ones that are going to damage him. So he appears to still be, he would argue, credible. And then there's Angela Rayner, who, I mean, my own view would probably be that, her problem is she was forced to resign because she didn't pay the right rate of stamp duty, and there is a tax investigation by HMRC going on. I think it is sort of ridiculous, actually, that we should be living through this period of real jeopardy for the government, and HMRC hasn't opined on this. I mean, they should bloody well pull their finger out, because it's bad for democracy that actually we don't know whether she can be a candidate because they haven't opined. It can't be that complicated, right? But she can't sort of show her, she's not a credible candidate until we know whether HMRC feel that she really seriously crossed a line. I mean, if you want my honest view, I think she is, if she gets cleared, I think she probably is the candidate that unites both the membership, both the membership and enough MPs, right? That would be my hunch. The optimal outcome for Labour, by quite a wide margin, would be for Streeting and Rayner to do a deal. That would, because it unites. She's not on the hard left, but she's a bit to the left of Streeting. It unites the vast majority of MPs and members, and it looks orderly. And it would be quite an effective campaigning source now, campaigning team. Now, whether they can put their own ambition and egos to one side to do that, who knows? But it is, in a wholly irrational political world, it would be the rational outcome.
May I just say finally, Prime Minister Rayner would make our lives quite lively. Is all
I absolutely loved yesterday because I was on I was on a social media channel and this TikTok turns up of her doing her hair in a hairdresser and so I immediately texted her advisor and just said, is this real, right? Because it was a very odd thing to come out on the day when the chief of staff resigns, and he literally with a sort of the equivalent of a wink on a text message said no AI was used in this.
Okay.
But I don't know. She's mischievous, and that makes her a bit more fun than maybe other candidates are available. But she is a bit more fun and anyway. Look, the next big test we should just say to people, because obviously this is a sort of soap opera. The next big test will be the Gorton and Denton by-election. It's only at the end of this month. I think if Labour were to lose that badly, then all these protestations of support from all these other ministers, well, you have to ask yourself whether they're worth the paper they're written on.
Okay, Robert and I will be back midweek. Thank you very much for joining us. If you haven't already, hit subscribe for Talking Politics on YouTube or indeed on any podcast platform. Please do. Go ahead and make our day. Thanks for joining us. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.